Okay, so first, I play two roles. I'm Daniel's mom, and I'm a middle school principal. Mom first. I have 4 kids. My husband, Tony, and I, we are blessed with 4 children, a 15-year-old, a 7-year-old, a 5-year-old, and a 2-year-old. Daniel, who is my firstborn, is 7 years old and does live with Prader-Willi syndrome. I could say as a parent, and I'm sure you can relate as a caregiver, that every milestone that we've had has been a huge celebration. But every challenge that we have had has been incredibly exhausting. And the idea of raising a child living with Prader-Willi syndrome, and especially partnering with a school and ensuring that when you're sending your child off to school and that you're confident that they need to be safe, is overwhelming, exhausting, and scary. I mean, just really scary. So, as an educator, I come to you, I'm here in front of you with 16 years of experience in public education. My entire career has been in the middle school setting, and that's grades 6 through 8, so talking about 11 to 14-year-olds has been my educational experience. And this, currently I'm serving in my 10th year as a building principal, so 10th year as an administrator. So I'm gonna start with my horror story, because I want to start here and tell you that where you can avoid some horror stories like mine, and it being October, it appropriately fits. So this is not a true picture. In my mind, the very first experience of transitioning for our son, Daniel, into kindergarten. So we had a great experience in early education in the preschool setting, and preparing for our very first transition IEP to move into kindergarten. We had an amazing IEP experience in March. We had 13 people around the table. The transition team was there. The nurse, the school administrator was there, the teacher from preschool, and then the upcoming teacher in kindergarten was there. Myself, my husband Tony was there. We were ready. We had this great 2-hour experience transition IEP meeting, and everything. I went in ready for, I got to fight for everything, and I walked out and I said, wow, that was amazing. Like, we're ready. This is a great transition. We've got a great plan in place. So this 2-hour meeting in March that we held, it was a great plan. We were ready. We were geared up for kindergarten. So I just want to caution that there's 3 parts. The reason this presentation is broken into 3 parts, the importance of that third P of ongoing participation with the school is so incredibly important. And we learned that as parents, that there was more past that IEP meeting that needed to happen to take place. So here was the reality of what happened. 3 days before we went into kindergarten, 3 days, so first day of school was Thursday. 3 days before school, we received notification that the kindergarten transition program involved walking through the cafeteria line, picking up milk and cookies, and sitting down so that students knew how to go through the lunch line appropriately. The second part of that kindergarten transition plan was to then get onto a school bus and drive around on a school bus. That was the kindergarten transition plan. So we were a little paused by that and contacted the school and said, we had this great IEP meeting, and so as you're aware, part of the safety for our son Daniel is he can't have access to food. And so walking through a cafeteria line and picking up a cookie is not going to be effective for him. It's not going to be safe, and we're not going to get the information if we participate in that. And secondly, riding on a school bus, he needs supports because his body isn't strong enough to hold himself up, so we have certain transition needs, certain transportation needs. So we contacted, and here was the response. From our school experience. The response is, well, that's fine because this event was taking place the next day and school was starting 3 days later. Well, we understand the needs. So what we were thinking is, as a family, while we're going through the cafeteria line, you guys can just stand outside. And then once we finish with the cookies, you can come in and we can make sure that you get the information. And then the second event, the Meet the Teacher Night, PTA was so kindly offering popsicles to every family as they exited. And so our question for that was, so what's the accommodation plan for that? and they generously offered us to exit the back door. So that was our reality of a really excellent IEP plan that was put in place. So the lack of understanding of the safety needs of our children, without a real true understanding of those participating in that IEP meeting, can result in the exclusion of our children. And what we realized as part of that IEP plan, there was no care plan that was added to his IEP to ensure the safety for the food needs. So I'll talk a little bit about that as we get through. So we're going to start with how your children are protected. So I mentioned the word inclusion and exclusion, making sure that our children aren't excluded. So just take a minute to look at this visual. There are 3 different kind of visuals here that I want you to kind of reflect on, and thinking about what you know about the law that protects our children from educational exclusion. So I'm going to give you a minute to kind of reflect on these 3 images. Our goal as parents is always inclusion. Our goal is that our kids are fully included in whatever is happening in an educational environment to provide them with the best experiences that they can have. The integration component is an aspect that when I talk about the care plan, how is the building, the school making accommodations and modification to ensure that our students are integrated, our children are integrated with all the activities happening. Segregation, the example that I just gave of when we were generously offered the opportunity to exit out of the back door so that we didn't get offered popsicles. So thinking about that segregation, that was an example of us being segregated and Daniel, our child, being segregated, moving out of an external door based on his disability. And then thinking about exclusion, that was that idea when we were asked to just step outside and wait externally of the cafe while all the other children went through the cafeteria line and picked up their cookie and milk and sat down at the table, and we were being excluded from that introductory activity based on his disability. So just kind of thinking about what are the laws in place that ensure that our children have an inclusive educational experience. I'm just going to go through a little bit of history of law, and then we'll jump into what are those practical strategies to protect our children and make sure that they have a really great educational experience. Okay, so I apologize in the back because this may be really hard to read with this small literature, but again, this is just a brief slide that I just want to go over some legal jargon, legal language, just to give you kind of the background. So the IDEA, Individuals with Disabilities in Education Act, this is a federal law. It's a federal to protect children in America, American legislation, ensuring that children with a disability are provided with a free and appropriate public education. Essentially, that in education, that there can be no educational exclusion based on a disability. Section 504 of the Rehabilitation Act is a civil rights law, not an education law, but a civil rights law that ensures equal access regardless of disability. So the difference being an educational versus civil rights law. And I'm going to go through in a minute to give you a little more clarification about the difference of these two. The special education process, in summary, is a process that is where an evaluation to determine if a child needs modifications or accommodations in an educational setting. Anyone can request an evaluation for any child that states, I believe that there could be an educational disability here. The data is reviewed, and if data determines that there's a disability, an educational disability, which is different than a medical disability, then an IEP meeting, an educational individualized plan meeting, is held. Some things to think about as parents and some of our rights as caregivers and parents, that before making any changes to an IEP, parents must receive written notification. There should not be a change made to an IEP that you as a parent are not aware of and have been given written notification of. Additionally, a district must make every effort to include the parents in the IEP process. We are part of the team. We are the most critical part of the team to determine what is educationally appropriate for our children. We are the experts of our children. Those others at the table are the experts of the education. So everyone around the table has an expertise to bring into play. The one thing to note, these meetings should be scheduled. It should be considered a parent's schedule when scheduling the meetings within reasonable time of the school hours. So within the reason, the school should be making accommodations to support our parents being present, but also considering within a reasonable time of school hours, as teachers are also part of the team and expected to be part of that table, part of that conversation. So that's some of the law, the background, and then just a little bit more on some of the differences between IEP and 504. I don't know if you've heard of the difference of those two, but again, we're going to go back to the type of law. So the IEP is under IDEA, and that's an educational law, whereas Section 504 is a civil rights law, so it protects all individuals with a disability. The Department of Education runs IDEA, and the Office of Civil Rights runs a Section 504 plan. Eligibility of getting an IEP has to do with, is there an educational diagnosis? So again, to get an educational diagnosis, there's testing that takes place, which means, is the medical disability impacting a child's access to their education? In our case, given the various challenges that our students have, that our children have, an IEP, a 504, the protections of their medical diagnosis can be written into an IEP. It's not a separate plan. You don't have two plans. But some of the strategies I'm going to give you is how do we make sure that their medical needs are written into that educational plan. Okay? An IEP protects a child through 12th grade. A 504 ensures accommodations and modifications through life. So when we heard the great example of transition programming, all of that, once 12th grade ends, an IEP ends. But under law 504, the Section 504, any individual with a disability can receive supports to access life. And then discipline, just one note on discipline. So again, kind of the principal side here. So having a disability does not exclude a child from the same expectations, behavioral expectations of anyone in a school building. What is unique about a child having a disability is what happens if there is an over 10 days of suspension is given for a behavior. On the 11th day, a child with a disability and with an IEP, there is a meeting that's held that's called a manifestation meeting, anytime after 10 days. And you, as a caregiver, are a part of that manifestation. And again, it's a team of people that come together to look at what were the behaviors that were happening, and were those behaviors a direct manifestation of the child's disability. And if it is found, yes, this was a direct manifestation of the child's disability, the next action is then that means the IEP plan that we have in place is not working or is not being followed, one of the two. So that team starts to explore, do we need to put some other pieces in place in that IEP? An IEP is meant to level the playing field. It is that we add accommodations and modifications to ensure that the disability, that we can ensure that all students are meeting the same level of proficiency, the same level of performance, if put in place fully, okay? So we're gonna move into the 3 Ps. So that was a little history, a little background. So I don't know if you read the description of this, but I am an educator, and so it's really hard to just stand and talk. So we are going to have a little interaction. So if you're not really wanting to interact, I'm sorry, you signed up for the wrong session. So you are welcome to exit out now or get ready, because here we go. We're going to start out the first section that we're going to start out, the first P that we're talking about. I'll close my eyes. It's all good. First P that we are going to talk about is preparing. So again, there's 3 stages to preparing for this partnership. And the first stage is preparing for your IEP. So we're just going to take a shout out. So in education world, that means you just shout out first thing that's on your mind of some words, some feelings, some things that come across your mind when you think about preparing for an IEP. Go ahead. Stress. Exhaustion. Strategy. Anxiety, details, fear, research, advocate. Give me more. 3 more.
Benchmarking.
Alcohol, benchmarking. All right. Goals. Thanks. I got that 3rd one. So preparing for the IEP. So we're going to jump in. And again, like I said, I hope that this session gives you just some strategies, things that you haven't thought about, but I know the collective ideas in this room, we've all got some great strategies. So I want to encourage, this is a starting place. Take some time right at the end, mingle with each other and share more ideas, because it's our collective ideas that help make this process easier. So the first strategy that I want to share in preparing for your IEP is having real conversations with your support network. So the first way to attack this is to know who your support network is. So for myself, that's my husband, Tony. He and I collectively are the support network for Daniel. He is my one and only strongest support network that I have when it comes to what Daniel needs. And so this real conversation bit really looks like the 2 of us, and I may not go too detailed, but yes, sitting down at the kitchen table, maybe with something to drink, to say, okay, we're about to go into this, we're ready, he and I, and the first thing we do is we pull out any old current IEP or any old evaluation, depending on where you are in the process. If you're moving into kindergarten, we pulled out at that point all our early intervention reports, any information that we had from the past. Currently, what we do is we pull out our current IEP. So we get that out on the table, we have our pens and our highlighters, and we're ready to just really dig into this current IEP. Then we look at the goals. So are the goals that were set last year, are they still appropriate? Are they still relevant? Has there been progress that have been made towards these goals? If there has been progress and we don't think that they're relevant anymore, then we ask ourselves the question, what are our hopes for Daniel's progress this year? Because hopes then turn into goals, which turn into the strategies that I heard over here and turn into some benchmarks. But it starts with our hopes, like where should Daniel be by the end of this year? And then lastly, we talk about what are the required safety needs that have to be somehow embedded within this IEP. And we make lists. So these are the lists that we make so that we know when we go into this meeting that we have already predetermined whether or not we believe he's made progress on the goals that he currently has. If we believe that he made progress, they're going to show us the data because they're the experts in that area. If we don't believe he's made progress, then again, we're going to depend on them to show us the data because they're the experts in the data. We're the experts in Daniel. And then we're going into an IEP meeting with some potential goals to start the year. These are our hopes. This is what we want to see. These are our academic goals for him. Here's where we want him to be. And then we also have our little sticky note on the side, and we know that as we go through that IEP meeting, we're going to make sure that embedded within that IEP are all of the safety needs for his food, the food safety needs that he has. So the next step, the next thing that we do is we create literature. For us, since we've been through this process a few times, it more looks like we're updating the literature. And all of this, anything that I show you is accessible. I've got a flash drive and I'm giving it to the team so they can make it accessible for you to edit, do whatever you need to do with it if it's something that you feel that would be helpful for you in the process. So we make, there are 3 different pieces of literature that we prepare ahead of time, and then we pay the money to go get a Kinko copy, color copy, so that we come in with a stack, everything ready to go, so there's nothing extra that needs to be done except execution. And so the first thing we make down here is a pamphlet, and this has been shared in our community. This is not a me, this is is there anyone in this who created this? 'Cause anyone whoever created this, I just want to give you a hug and a high five and tell you thank you, because this is why this community is awesome. Like, we share. So what you're seeing here is a result of just collaboration and the amazing things that our community is doing to help us do this together. So we create this pamphlet, and you said you've got one too? Yeah. We create the pamphlet, and that is specifically given to any adult that is going to be having any kind of interaction whatsoever with Daniel. So the school nurse, the bus driver, the teachers, the after-school support personnel, paraprofessionals, the principal, the office staff, that just talks about Daniel, but then on the back also talks about, in the pamphlet, this little trifold pamphlet, it talks about what are some challenges, some triggers, and then how do you deal with those triggers? What are some strategies that you can use immediately to help bring Daniel back to ready to learn? And we don't fill it. We usually put our biggest 3 that we see. The other one here on the left we create is for the students in his class. I want to caution that we had to come to a point that we felt very safe with the teacher, and that we felt like the community was a safe place for Daniel. And again, going back to that picture of the goal is inclusion, is that he is involved in anything, and we know that the greatest factor of inclusion has nothing to do with adults, but everything to do with the students. And so our way to access students is through adults and parents. And so we create the pamphlet of how to be a good friend to your classmate Daniel. What does it look like when I, have some challenges? What do my challenges look like? And then how can I respond? And then we send that home to parents of this children in his class. And we have gotten just some awesome texts and responses. Yeah.
Do you have to clear that with the IEP team on whether or not you can hand that out?
So it is brought into the IEP, and we've never had anyone say no. Yeah.
There are some schools that bulk at that, and they will not allow you to share that with students, and they want to use HIPAA as an excuse. So we've had it that we could through Help Me Grow or
Sure.
But then once we got in the school district, we had one building that was the teachers themselves took it upon them to promote the education within the building. Now we're in another building, high school. No, HIPAA, not allowed to do it. Will not share the information, both as all the staff in the building along with the peers.
So that's a great, the HIPAA, that's great, because again, that's one of those laws that protects the privacy of our children.
And my argument is, I'm signing off.
I was going to say, yeah.
And they still don't know.
I would say that you advocate to sign something, because that, for their own protection, if they're concerned about the liability.
We fight with them also, even though it's part of the IEP, to forward the information to the bus compound that the bus drivers know. They don't forward that, and not just for our child, but for all the kids that ride the buses, they don't forward that information. We have gotten that part.
Just hand it to them?
Yeah, we
There you go.
There you go. I know they haven't talked to you, but this
Yep.
is what my child is. And luckily enough, the busing, there's only a certain amount of bus drivers, so they, through the spec ed buses, they all know Juliana, and they all know that, and it works out great.
So the workarounds. So we're also really good as parents on those workarounds, because we have to be often. So thinking about some of those workarounds, but definitely, if you want something like this shared, because it could be a risk, this is a risk, and this again is what I'm sharing is something that we've done that has been successful with us. But when we go into the partner with the school, I'll tell you some strategies of how we've done that, which has made a safer space for us to be able to do some of these things. But we have it ready, just in case. So, this is our readiness, all in our preparation piece. Yeah.
I have a quick question about the form on the left, and maybe also from parents of older kids. So I did this trifold this year, but I have a little one. He's in pre-K. My mom, lifelong educator and middle school administrator, sort of said, you can get away with this now, but he's going to have opinions about this as he gets older. And I'm wondering, what Daniel has said about how he feels about, this being shared with his peers, and has he found that there's enough benefit that he says, yeah, let's do it? How does that conversation go?
I think it's a great, because we're not there yet in the sense of having an older, because again, he's only in first grade. So Daniel's still in first grade. The benefit right now for him is he's made some connections with friends. So Daniel repeated kindergarten due to some social connections. And what we found is the second year that we did this, we found that he started coming home. We would always ask the question, who are your friends? And so the whole first year of kindergarten, we never got a name. We didn't do this, though, that first year of kindergarten. You all have that visual? Right. So the second year of kindergarten was a different experience, and this was a strategy that we used the second year, not the first year, that for us, upon reflection, we felt created more opportunities for conversation with his peers that he wasn't having before, because of they had a better understanding of some of his behaviors and how to be a good friend when he's exhibiting some of those behaviors. Yeah.
I'll give you an example for you guys, since I'm an older one. When we got to middle school, they had their All About Me days that they can tell their peers about them. And not only did they do a poster, they did a presentation on themselves. My daughter Juliana said, I want to tell about Prader-Willi. So she brought in information, and she spoke. I just sat there to help her over those little social cues and hurdles on how to speak about it. So that's another way of working around.
Yeah.
But
great
that's
strategy.
Only that classroom, and there's another 150 to 300 kids in that class, so they don't all hear that.
Yeah. Great strategy.
So mine's 11. When she wrote about All About Me, it was about her. She is more trying to fit in as her peers. So she was following her peers' cues. Sometimes also doesn't recognize that is something that, while she knows she's different, doesn't fully recognize always that is what the difference is. The other thing is, we moved to a blended program. We actually moved out to where there was a blended program.
Okay.
Got a peer set that have kind of gone with her and have now become advocates for her because you develop that. So in either way, through this or through other methods, creating that peer group that helps communicate it to the other peers is significant, at least from our experience so far.
Great examples. Some of those activities, the sports, the the things that are engaging. Great. Junior Olympic. I know we do the junior version of Special Olympics right now. Daniel calls it Sports Party, which is cool because then we get to go to sports party every Wednesday, and that's super cool. He's got an outfit and everything. So it's but yeah, creating those networks and celebrating, because what do our kids not to have to celebrate? Our kids are awesome. So, just so great input. The last thing, yeah.
Sorry, I just want to add real quick. My son's 14 and 8th grade. He's in inclusion classes with resource help. He does not think like this. Like, he wants everybody to know what he has, but he doesn't care. If someone knew, it wouldn't bother him. But what I was going to say, too, is all of this needs to be kept to what I found is people want to know what they should do. So don't overwhelm the page with words, hyperphagia, low muscle tone, blah, blah, blah. They don't need to know about that part. It doesn't help them understand how to interact with your child. So think about if you were meeting somebody with a rare something that's totally different, what can I do to help you? So something as simple as my other son who has a peanut allergy, we're like the food people. They want to know, how can I help keep Cole safe? They don't want to know all about the details of, So that's something to keep in mind with the wording on these things. Is just friendly and age appropriate, and it can grow and change, and keep it as simple as possible.
Great feedback.
I know for myself, we're actually in a small school district, but they actually have another child with PWS that's 16, 17, but on the very not hands-on and stuff like that. So they have this conception of, oh, well, we know about PWS. Oh no, you took him to a buffet and let him eat whatever he want. Stuff like that. So they think, oh, it's not a big deal. We don't have to. I'm like, just wait. Right. So they're having, but to the other parent, that was okay.
Sure.
So to them, it's like retraining them on what is acceptable and what's not. And okay, that's great for that other parent, but try me.
Yeah.
So.
Great. Good input. Lots of good input. Again, it's our collective thoughts. I'm up here to just get it going, but that's really good input collectively. The last thing is we always bring, just kind of thinking about, because it sounds really hard, especially in an elementary school, like, what do you mean we have celebrations without food? I don't even know what that looks like. So, any kind of suggestions or strategies, that you can already come in with is super helpful to the process. So again, we're still on the first P. Like, this is what you do to prepare. We're not even in the meeting yet. This is just that preparation. So the last step to take in that preparation is recruit your support team. So you need to think about who it is that's going to be in that meeting and who you feel that you need to be in that meeting with you. And then once you figure out who is in that meeting with you, so for Tony and I, it's Tony and I. We know that's going back to, he is my strongest support team. I am his strongest support team. So we are a team, and that is who we have. There are resources to have an advocate. If you feel that you need an educational advocate in there with you, then reaching out to get an educational advocate. If you want to bring a family member with you. The key to knowing your support team is knowing what role they play and predetermining that. So when Tony and I prepare to go into an IEP, we identify who is going to be the writer, who is going to be scribing and making sure that we're keeping notes, because we're going to fall back on those notes. And we're going to predetermine that, because otherwise it's so emotional, guys. You all know when we get in there, it becomes so emotional and it's personal and it's scary and there's all these people. And so the better prepared you are in saying, okay, I know we're going to go in here and we predetermine, hey, Tony, you're going to take the lead on talking and I'm going to take the lead on writing. And so if there's something that and then we prepare, and Tony, we make a plan that, he's going to keep checking in. Is there anything you want to add? And it's not because, that's just how we function in everyday life. It's because that's how we've strategized to be most efficient in this meeting. So really determining what that looks like, and I strongly recommend just have somebody writing, because I promise you on the other side, somebody's writing. Okay, so just to make sure that you're getting all the same information. Yeah.
Are you allowed to record these meetings?
So that would be on a case by case. You could ask in the meeting. You can't record without predetermining that. So you can always ask, and I think that would be the makeup of a meeting of whether or not they would provide, that permission or not. We've always been successful with writing, but I would venture on the side that it probably would not be, just because it's a legal meeting, and but I would ask. I don't know if I could answer that yes or no.
I have one more question.
Yeah.
We're going to be having our first IEP meeting this month. My son's 3. If you go in with an advocate from the beginning, from an administrative standpoint, are they automatically on the offensive?
So, good question. I'm going to repeat it for the back. So in a meeting, going into a first-time meeting, if you bring an advocate, are people already on the defensive? And I'm going to say, again, that really depends on the climate and the environment that you have. Me as a principal, when an advocate comes in, sometimes there's a little bit of anxiety with the teachers that I serve, but often, with some words of, this is great, now we've got more people at the table to brainstorm what's best for this child. But that's me as a principal leading, and that's me as a principal leading with a child with special needs. So what I can say, and we'll get on here on the next slide, you do whatever you have to do to make sure that you're getting the best needs of your child. And you can't control the responses of those that react or assume. You can only control doing what you need to do to advocate for your child's needs. Yeah.
I'm an educator, and my grandson has Prader-Willi. So if you have your IEP meeting scheduled, did they send a notification? Because I'm from Louisiana, and we have to send a notification at least 10 days before. And on that notification, it says, if you're going to bring someone like that, and as the educator on the other side, we don't necessarily have to hold a meeting if we don't know that somebody's coming. So if you're going to bring someone, you really need to sign the notice and say who you're going to bring. Because that would put me off in certain situations. I mean, I've been doing this 35 years, so most situations don't, but probably if my daughter wants me to go in with that, I'll have totally different expectations. But, I think letting them know ahead of time and having that conversation where everybody's on the same page, where it doesn't seem like it's adversarial, will be the most helpful.
We don't have a date yet, I just know we have to have it by October 31st.
Because you have to have it before they turn 30.
Yeah.
Right.
And here's that other suggestion out here, up here, reaching out to the principal ahead of time and just having a super informal, like going in, hey, what kind of coffee do you like from Starbucks? Do you have a couple minutes? I'd like to just sit down with you. And especially in going into an environment that you're unfamiliar with. So a new school, transition IEP. That informal first meeting is going to be so much more impactful because you will have the investment of that principal and that school leader already who feels like they already know your child. Take a picture of your child, take one of those pamphlets, just say, hey, I just want to say this is who we are. We're super excited to be part of this community. I just wanted to get to know you. I wanted you to know my child. And we've got an IEP coming up and can't wait, but, I just wanted to make sure we connected. Also a good strategy, I think, to then, kind of curb even that just first official meeting, right?
Two questions. California and Broadway. I don't know if that matters or not. We already had our initial IEP. My son turned 3 in May. There wasn't principal at that meeting.
Okay.
You were saying principal, reach out to the principal and all that. Principal wasn't there, so how does the principal stand in the whole thing? And then before I forget to ask you, you said writing, want somebody on your team write. Well, every time I go to a meeting, they have somebody who's just, as we are talking, even informally, typing everything down. And so how in real life, if your husband is typing and the school educator team's representative is typing, then what happens for me is they print everything out, they give it to me, they kind of rush me through reading it, so I have to be very protective of, no, I'm going to read everything you wrote. And then, of course, they want you to sign it right then and there. So how do you marry the husband's note with what the school's putting in front of me? How do you practically, so if he's how are you going to make everything work?
So you have time, yeah, you want to jump in?
So, two things, and I'm not sure how it works for you, but for us, they actually project what they're typing on a screen. We make them put it up so that as we're going, we're watching what's actually being put in the IEP. Because I'm not gonna be rushed to read through it, and if they've typed it and I haven't seen it at all, no way, I won't sign it that way.
I can tell you right now, they're not going to do it. So what's my next option?
You take it home.
Take it home.
Don't you have a time frame though that you can?
It's 10 days.
Yeah.
There's a 10-day time frame.
So I can take it home and I have 10 days to review it. And then the tango starts back and forth. I would like to have this changed.
That's it. Tango, that is such a good word. Yes, that is what that is, because it's a back and forth. And again, like really setting the stage of here, and when we get into this IEP, so your principal question, I think I'm going to hit in this next section. But there needs to be a school representative, not necessarily the principal. And I'll tell you what I recommend, and part of that recommendation comes from that informal, hey, can we have a coffee chat real quick? I'd really love you in on this first IEP meeting if you don't mind. I know your schedule's super busy, but just while we get things started, if you don't mind, if you're able to attend, it would be awesome. Just that positive first interaction, you can invite them. It is not required that they are there. It is required that there is a school representative there, and often that is a counselor that serves as the representative.
So this would not be the initial evaluation, right? This is where you already know my child's going to be going to this school.
Yep, and you're creating an IEP. You're creating the goals and the plan. Yep.
This might be a little bit different. We might be moving out of district, so how do you take your current IEP that's already in place, take it to a new school district, and have that in place?
So in regard to a transitioning district or schools, that IEP is transitioned over for you. That's a part of the collection of documents for registering in any new school. So that same current IEP will be going with you. And then the case manager would be assigned at that new school. They would be reaching out to you, reviewing it, and then if you need to reconvene the IEP, then it would be reconvened at the new setting.
Okay.
Yep. Okay, so again, we're going to just jump right in here. So we're moving into the second session, and we're talking about the second P. Okay, so this is participate in the IEP process. Okay, so we talked about preparation. You put all that preparation in, you had your coffee, you're ready to go, you got your plan, you got your strategies, you got everything. So we do have the fairy godmother up here because she's very sweet. She is so positive, and when you go into an IEP meeting, that is the demeanor you want to come in with. I am here, we are going to make this happen, but I want you to keep in mind that we have to advocate very clearly, and that goes back to the question of if I bring an advocate. Absolutely. You need to advocate. If there are things happening, you need to ask the questions. I don't recommend going in cursing, like that's not going to get you very far. But what I can tell you is just kind of this meme that was shared with me, again, by my husband. He's got some good things to share with me. But it really, as I was preparing for this, it really stood out and came back in my memory because that is kind of the demeanor that we take when we go into an IEP. We are very approachable. We are ready to partner. But we also are very clear that if there are things happening, we're going to ask the tough questions, and we're going to stand on those, and we're going to expect to have pretty clear answers before we sign anything. So we're going to just move for a minute because we've been just sitting for a minute. So I just very quickly, if you have ever walked out of an IEP meeting feeling defeated, stand up. Okay, so I want you to look around because I want to make sure that you understand that nobody in this room is alone. We have people in this room, and you all, these are the experiences that we're having collectively, so the goal of this is we can start to put some strategies in place so we're not feeling this. Thank you. Go ahead and have a seat. Have you ever left an IEP meeting feeling like you were not heard? Okay. Thank you. Have you ever sat through an IEP meeting and didn't understand half of what was said or agreed to? Okay. All right. You're not alone, guys. You're not alone. Before I put number 4, have you ever had the feeling of you have no idea what to expect at an IEP meeting? Okay, cool. Again, so a lot of collective experiences here. And then a thought, and my hope is we're going to ask this question now, but we're going to ask this question at the very end. Do any of you look forward to your next IEP meeting? Okay, cool, good, awesome. Yeah, okay. So my hope is by the end, like you guys are charged and we're going to have full room standing at that one. Okay, so who should be at the table? And I'm getting a wrap up, so we're going to move through. So again, some of the logistics. Principal, until there's an established partnership, if you can get them at the table, that's a really great strategy. Classroom teacher, school counselor, IEP case manager, school nurse, all teachers involved in providing services. Paraprofessionals, you can request to be there. If you have somebody that is going to be with your child providing support minutes, they are not invited usually. We like to request that our paraprofessionals are there because they have the most direct connection with our son. And then parents, advocates if desired, and depending on the age and appropriateness, your child with Prader-Willi syndrome. The IEP format, and this is the same, pretty much goes, what I always recommend is you start the meeting with anything that you want to share, because it sets the tone that you are that child's advocate. So any of those pamphlets or anything you want to share, don't wait for them to ask you. Start with, hey, thanks so much for coming together. We're so excited to partner. Here's some stuff we want to share with you before we get started. That sets the tone that you're your child's first advocate. How the disability impacts involvement in general education. So this is the format of, this is all the things you're going to talk about in the meeting. Present level and evaluation results, strengths and concerns. So you remember when we prepared, we talked about what our strengths and concerns were, so now we're ready for it. Special considerations, so that's those IEP, those food safety experiences when you're talking about, do we need a special transportation that's a food-free environment? Do we need a food-free environment across the board? Goals and data, this is where you become a part of that conversation because you've already predetermined some goals as a team. So this is where you talk about what your hopes are, which turn into goals. Services summary, and that's where there's an outline of here are the minutes. And in that service summary, you want to make sure there are enough minutes put in there to protect your child with support minutes when they're eating, if that's what you decide is needed. For Tony and I, we want a paraprofessional or adult sitting with Daniel when anytime food is present. And so we need to make sure the minutes are large enough that they're accommodating for that. And accommodations and modifications, and this is where much of your care plan comes into place. And I'm sorry, I know I'm flying through. It was too long. Asking questions. So this is where, this is how you start to embed the food safety in all of the sections of the IEP. At present level, does it mention the need for support when food is present in all settings? In special considerations, these are the sections, and then these are the questions that we ask to make sure that the food support is embedded within each of those sections. When considering the goals, what is expected of a typically developing child, and then are our goals setting our kids up to make that progress? Service summary, are adult support minutes large enough to cover transition times and meal times? And then is there a reference to the environment being food-free across all settings in the care plan?
I'm sorry, when you're talking about adult support minutes, what are you talking about?
Thanks for asking. Adult support minutes mean, so again, going back to that 504 in IEP, 504 protects the medical needs of our students. You won't have two plans, you have one plan in IEP. So in order to ensure that we have enough minutes of support, that means that we have an adult for a certain amount of minutes for a certain purpose. And so for Tony and I, Daniel has support minutes when food is present. So that is an adult that is supporting him when food is present. What's that? Staff. So it would be like a paraprofessional. It may not be a certified teacher, but it would be an adult that is there to support during those times.
So do you have to tell them, or do they have to, let's say lunch break is half an hour, so that'd be 30 minutes there. But
Correct.
whenever food is present.
A snack time may be another 15 minutes.
So do you have to, like at the end of the day, sign, okay, whenever there's food present, which means open minutes? Or do you have to say 60 minutes a day?
60 minutes, it would be very specific to the calculations of the time. So we ask the questions, how long is lunch? How long is snack time? How many transitions are there? How many minutes are in those transitions? And then we add them up. And again, they are the experts in that. So you are just asking the questions to make sure that they're doing it.
What if there's a birthday party and it's, it doesn't happen every day?
So that, I know.
In our IEPs, you can put that under comments.
Yeah.
Here in Louisiana, you can put that in comments. So when you do your support minutes, is that ours is community minutes, inclusion minutes, or special
Yeah.
minutes? So where do you put it?
So it's in the summaries, and it's a part of the care plan that's attached. So this is that care plan.
It's like the health plan here in Louisiana, we call it a health plan.
Health plan, care plan, yes. And this is where you talk about those birthday parties. So it's for us, for Tony and I, we require a week's notice, 5 days notice of any celebration. We also require no food in certain celebrations. We put whatever we talk about in a care plan that we're expecting, and then we partner. But the biggest thing about that partnership, being sure that you're connecting with a partnership, is really thinking about what are you willing to be flexible on. You may not be willing to be flexible on anything, which is your how you approach the IEP. For us, we're very intentional about thinking about what we're flexible on and what we aren't. And so handing out cupcakes at birthdays, we're not super flexible on, because it's just we don't have enough time, and so we give those other ideas. But there are some things that we are flexible on, and we create a plan for, and we, say, okay, if you guys are going to have a Valentine's Day party, that's fine. For us, we're flexible with that because we've created a different plan for that. So that's Valentine's Day for Dad and Daniel, and they just create a whole day out of that. And so it's where we're a little flexible with the schools, so they don't have to change everything. Okay, they can have their Valentine's Day party. Daniel's going to be safe, but that was personal for Tony and I, my husband and I, what we decided to do to be flexible on.
We gotta go.
All right, so the rest of this is going to be, there's only 2 more things, and it's just your documentation, but all these resources will be available. And if you guys have any questions, I'm just going to shoot to this last one. Here's an email address you can reach me, and I'm happy to connect with you, field questions. But you guys are doing great. You guys are doing great. We're all doing great. This is a great community, and I just hope this was helpful. And thank you so much. Sorry, I ran over. Thank you, Katy.